And he went about 100 yards, started smoking, and he says on the radio, "I'm going down." As a scout pilot in 1969, I was flying on a mission up in an area called the T-10 Valley in the 3rd Corps Tactical Zone, very close to a place most people would recognize called the Iron Triangle. We'd finished our reconnaissance mission. We're headed home. And anytime you flew in Vietnam from point A to point B, you had to contend with artillery. In addition to the air war, there was also a ground war going on. And guys on the ground were being supported by artillery coming from all different kinds of directions. So if you wanted to fly from Dao Tiang in the northwest to Phu Loi in the southeast, that's a straight line. But you had to check in with the division artillery system to see there's artillery coming out of Lai Khe on an axis of 185 with a max ord of 12,000 feet. So we knew we couldn't fly over it. So we had to figure out a way to get from where we were to our home base. And so we decided to cross into the 25th Infantry Division's area of operations, where there was no artillery at that point in time. We were in an area that we were fairly unfamiliar with. But we're flying down the T-10 River, and we decided to go low level because there was artillery coming out of Cu Chi going to the northeast. And we couldn't get over it, but we could go under it. We knew where it was coming from. We knew where it was landing. So we flew under it at low level. And as we're flying across a nipa palm line, tree line, all of a sudden I look down. I'm in a scout ship. I'm leading. The Cobra's following behind me. And I look out the right door, and there's 50 to 75 enemy soldiers all around a couple of campfires, and they're eating breakfast. We'd been up at first light. They immediately looked up. They saw me. They grabbed their weapons, and I keyed my radio, and I said, turn right, NVA. And before Dean Shiner, my number 2, could turn right, he flew right over the enemy formation, and by that time, they had dropped their food, they had their guns, and they just shot the pee-wadding out of him. And he went about 100 yards, started smoking, and he says on the radio, "I'm going down." And so he puts it into a rice paddy. Larry Kaufman and Dean Shiner, both captains, are flying the aircraft. And so I start a circle around those guys to cover them. And I'm on our troop UHF radio system calling for any of our aircraft from other teams that are in the general vicinity. I told them where we were. I said, I got the gunship is down. I need backup. Paul Fishman in another Cobra was up Highway 13 about 10 or 12 minutes away, and he says, "I'm coming. Hang on to what you got till I can get there." So I'm flying circles around Dean and Larry, and my gunner is shooting at the bad guys to keep their heads down and keep them off these 2 Cobra pilots. And I noticed a strange flurry of activity around their ship. And Dean is trying to do something with his hands. I couldn't tell what he was doing. And he just looked like he was frustrated. After a few minutes, the enemy started to move further and further. The fire became more accurate on where they were. And I told Fishman, I said, "We don't have time for a rescue aircraft. I'm going to get them." At that point, Paul arrived over my right shoulder and started shooting rockets right down the tree line where the enemy troops were. I circled around and landed right beside the downed Cobra. And Dean and Larry both jumped in my ship. Now, my ship was a 2-man aircraft with a large machine gun in the back and a lot of ammunition. And they jumped in, and it was a wet rice paddy, and the aircraft began to sink into the mud up to the belly. And I started to pull pitch or power to bring us up out of the mud. It wasn't moving. It wasn't going to go. And I yelled at my crew chief on the radio, the intercom. I said, "Dump everything we can dump." Over goes a ammo box with about 3,000 rounds of 7.62 ammo in it. We're dumping chicken plates, which is our body armor. We're dumping that overboard. I'm stirring the cyclic like I'm stirring a pot and I'm pulling up on the power, trying to jiggle the aircraft in the mud. And all of a sudden, it just pops straight up in the air about 25 feet. And we're off, and we fly on to Fouloy with Paul as a wingman to cover us. That flight took about 25 minutes. And when we landed and I shut it down, the aircraft engine had been so over-torqued and so overheated that the combustion section and the compressor section of the turbine melted together. And the tech rep came out, and he said, this aircraft should have stopped at that point, the first time you pull so much power. He says, do you know you took a bullet through the compressor? I said, no, I didn't even know I was hit. He said, yeah, one bullet came in the right side of the engine bay through the compressor section and out the other side. He said that engine should have quit at that point in time. We'd have all four been down there. Probably all four had been killed. But to me, that's a testimony to the durability and reliability of the Hughes OH-6, which is Howard Hughes. Hughes Helicopters of California made that aircraft. When I went and looked at the engine, I said I could not believe that thing continued to operate because the sections were literally fused together. They melted together. They asked me how high the torque had been. I said, I don't know. It was max. It was pegged for probably 8 to 10 minutes. Turbine outlet temperature was pegged in the red for 8 to 10 minutes. It should have died. It didn't. So those are the two stories that come immediately to mind.